Okay, welcome to the CMC, Canadian Music Centre. My name is Greg Bruce, and this is my workshop called Embrace Lo-Fi, cassette tapes and creative practice. So you can see all my cassette tapes here and some of my cassette players, and yeah, this is what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be covering, well, first I'm going to start by talking about kind of myself as an artist and some of my practices and how I got into this rabbit hole of cassette tape media. And then we're going to talk about cassette tapes as pre-digital media. So when they first came out and were kind of cutting edge, and we'll talk about some related technologies and how they were used in composition, performance, and production. And then we'll talk about more so the topic at hand is cassette tapes as a post-digital medium. So we'll talk about what post-digitalism is and how we can, how cassette tapes are creatively used as, let's say, an alternative to digital media. So we'll then talk about, some specific cassette tape uses, and I'll demonstrate what the capabilities of different players are, and then we'll get into kind of an instructional tutorial on how to make cassette tape loops. And so we will take a little break. We're not going to use the whole 90 minutes now. So yeah. Thank you for coming and being here. All right. Okay, we got someone else coming in. This is fantastic. Yeah. Hello. Come on in. So I'll just continue. So I'm a saxophonist. I'm currently finishing off my DMA through the University of Toronto. I'm completing my 4th year, and my research topic is on feedback saxophone. Now, this is not a commonly known or commonly practiced topic, but if you're coming to the concert this evening, you will hear what I'm doing in that milieu. Now, the thing with my research in feedback saxophone is that it's really related to specific equipment, and I engage with that practice really using, I started at least using only analog equipment. Okay, and so the equipment I was using again was integral to the sounds and the whole practice, really. And if I change one of the pieces of equipment, then the sounds I get and how I approach the practice from a creative perspective and a production perspective and all that changes completely. So this really got me thinking about the materiality of electronic media in general, and it's a topic that I just kept having interest in and thinking about. Well, the question came up as was what other media may be combined with the saxophone to encourage new sounds and new practices that again, like my feedback saxophone practice, was based on the physical material media itself, and maybe couldn't necessarily be replicated digitally, or and I think part of this, and we'll talk a little bit later, is that while some of the sounds that you hear today and the sounds I work with acoustic feedback certainly could be produced digitally. But the act of creating, composing, the whole creative process, the flow of a performance and what's idiomatic in performance and what's not, that the material nature of physical media is plays such a large role in all those things. So this is the kind of the really broad topic of what I wanted to explore. Yeah, and so eventually, and just thinking and writing lots of notes to myself, and just trying, kind of exploring this topic and reading and everything, I finally landed on cassette tapes. I said, well, these are they're easy to come by. There seems like there was a lot of artists I was listening to that were using them in creative ways, and there's not a lot of people that are kind of combining cassette tape performance practice or cassette tape production or whatever you want to call it with saxophone. So I thought, okay, this is great. So I probably began experimenting with cassette tapes and different cassette tape media in September of last year. And starting in March, I was really fortunate to receive a Canada Council for the Arts Research and Creation grant. So all my kind of work since then with cassette tape media is thanks to their generous support. And this evening you will hear some of the specific creative products that I've compositions and performances that I've come up with under this research and creation project. So let's see. Talked about feedback saxophone and Canada Council grant. Okay. So now we're going to talk about cassette tape media, or cassette tapes as pre-digital media. In composition, I guess starting around the mid 20th century, a lot of composers were working with tape. And in the earlier days, it was certainly not cassette tapes, but it was reel-to-reel tapes. And then at some point, probably maybe in the late 60s, and certainly as technology progressed into the 80s and early 90s, more composers were working with cassette tapes because they just became more affordable and readily accessible. So, I mean, even today, we hear of pieces written for tape, but there's no tape involved, right? It's often, people use this term to refer to fixed media. Because for so long, if composers wanted to make a fixed media track for whether it's completely acousmatic, so no active performer on stage, or whether it was to provide a musical accompaniment for a live performer, these musical products were on tape. And again, first starting reel-to-reel, but reel-to-reel isn't, it's really hard to transport. So with reel-to-reel, we had musique concrète, and again, kind of like the acousmatic, purely electronic composition. And certainly tape loops were a part of that practice. I mean, I believe, Terry Riley, for one of his works, famously made a reel-to-reel loop that went out his driveway and around a garbage can. It was it was many tens of feet long. So that would be a very long loop. And then in music production, of course, tapes were a huge innovation in how music was recorded. again, beginning around the 50s and certainly into the 60s, reel-to-reel and multi-track recording kind of was invented and became commercially available. So for the first time, first starting with reel-to-reels and then with multi-track cassette recorders, kind of like this one, except in the early days they were much bigger, you were able to record different parts of a piece at different times. And whereas before everyone had to be in the room playing live, right? And it was, some scholars refer to this as a documentary event. So it's okay, we know it's a thing happening in real time that we record, and this is what you're hearing. But with multi-track recording, you could set up people in different rooms, and certainly that could still be live. But through the use of overdubbing, which is where you would record one part at one time on one track, and then, well, if you had 8 tracks or however many tracks you had, the others were empty. So then you could go back and add those other tracks. So this, for the first time, all of a sudden the act of recording music was taken out of, like the temporality, was completely changed. And with certainly in electroacoustic and electronic composition, this was used to a lot of creative ends, and bands like the Beatles and Jimi Hendrix and people like this in the mid and late 60s really began pushing the creative boundaries of what was possible with overdubbing and multi-tracking. And this is sometimes referred to as a surreal recording event, because it's not sometimes not even possible to happen in real time when you're layering these things in such a complex way. And then in performance, like I mentioned, early tape technology, reel-to-reels, they wasn't very portable, so it wasn't very common. I don't believe there was any, there could have been some, but I don't believe there was any true performance practice with reel-to-reel. I'm sure there was a few people doing it, but it certainly wasn't very common. The real kind of performance practice with tape were pieces for tape, where you'd have a physical tape player on stage playing an electronic track that was accompanying or was part of a performance involving a live performer. And yeah, maybe the only one of the really interesting instruments that used tape was the mellotron, which was a keyboard that every key was connected to a tape loop, and like the Beatles kind of famously use this, and every key was connected to a tape loop, so you could actually basically sample whatever you wanted on a tape loop, and you can control the speed, and you can basically, it was a really early analog sampler. So if you want to consider that part of tape media performance practice, you can. But because the technology was new and expensive, it wasn't necessarily something that people could experiment with outside of really expensive electronic music labs, usually at universities. That was kind of everything. And I suppose I should mention that even in the 80s and early 90s, when devices like this lovely 4-track recorder were coming out, cassette tape media became kind of readily available to the wider public. And you have people that, the 4-track recorder is kind of one of the main ways that musicians that could buy these things and bring them into their homes. Like, they didn't have to necessarily go to a studio to record. It's like, okay, you have these 4 tracks, and you can do vocals, drums, like bass and guitar. let's just say, very common format for pop music. And so at that time, very state of the art. But of course, as the 90s progressed, we got digital technology, and we got digital audio workstations, and we got CDs, and of course MP3s, and we're living in the kind of in the midst of the digital revolution. And from a kind of pre-digital perspective, tape media lost its value to a lot of people. So, well, CDs just sound better. Using a DAW is just being able to edit and do overdubbing, could do everything that tape media could do, except much better, easier. I don't know if it was ever really cheaper, but anyways, it was, it kind of pushed cassette tape media out. So this is where the idea of cassette tapes as a post-digital media comes in. And post-digitalism is not necessarily something that's a specific movement or something that's incredibly well defined, but basically it's an aesthetic, a way of thinking that doesn't reject digital media, but it questions or perhaps rejects digital media's assumed superiority and ubiquity. So, so you can take that where you may. It certainly isn't some kind of neo-Luddism. It's not. I'm not. And I think a lot of people that are kind of interested in post-digital practices aren't Luddites. We don't think we should kind of go back. It's not about nostalgia. Like, I grew up listening to tapes and occasionally making mixtapes off the radio and things like that. And those are things that I don't really miss or long for or anything like that. I'm sure some people that work with tapes, that's why they work with them, because of the nostalgia. But I didn't really use them much, and they didn't. Tapes didn't mean a whole lot to me growing up, even though they were very much around and part of music culture. So it's not nostalgic, but it's a movement, way of thinking that embraces some of the idiosyncrasies and the unique or particular sonic or physical or whatever qualities are connected to physical electronic media. And coming from this perspective, it's about working within the limitations. And like I kind of mentioned at the beginning, of how I became interested in working with one kind of analog electroacoustic system and thinking about how can this thinking be applied and be explored elsewhere. And so it was nice to kind of discover this people working in post-digital or thinking in a post-digital way. And there's scholars and artists and all kinds who talk about post-optimal objects. Okay, so this idea that some objects are now designed to not be maybe the ideal thing. There are people that really are studying the effects of limitations on creativity and how it can be useful in getting kind of different musical results, in focusing our way of thinking, perhaps improving or changing the way we problem solve. So to return to some of these ways that cassette media are used as a post-digital medium in performance composition and production recording. They're not used as a way, like, you will find some people who just, they love the sound of tape and might think it's, might argue that it's better than CDs or better than an MP3 or something like that. But again, this is not really what post-digitalism is about. But it's about embracing the qualities that the media has. So in composition, of course, there are people that have found cassette tape media to be really useful for creating ambient music. And we will get into how to physically make a tape loop. So tape loops are really, depends. They're relatively easy to make. And because it's really hard to line them up to play in a particular meter. It's very, very challenging to do that. So from a post-digital perspective, we say, okay, well, we're not going to use them to play in a specific meter necessarily. Or perhaps the meter that comes from the loop is decided once the loop is made, not before. So it's, whereas in digital media, you kind of you can have your idea in your head and then be able to manifest it using software. Whereas that's much harder to do with cassette tape media and tape looping. So this idea of ambient music that is perhaps polytonal, polymetered, or perhaps no meter at all, and so it's used in a lot of contemporary ambient music. And I think that also covers acousmatic music, and I mentioned tape loops. So in production, and we'll hear a little bit of this in a moment, that there are a lot of artists, I guess perhaps in the pop world, like we've all seen the like lo-fi hip hop beats to study to, like that, and there's this real kind of growing interest in this like lo-fi aesthetic. And I think there perhaps is a nostalgia factor, but there are when music is recorded onto a tape, because it is a physical medium, there are things like wow and flutter. These are the ways the tape actually travels over the playhead, the read head on the tape, because it's not it's not moving at a completely 100% even rate. It's moving laterally. It's speeding up and slowing down slightly. So it adds this quality to the music. And of course, depending on the type of tape, which we'll get into, some tapes, well, when they're low quality, there's hiss, there's other noise, and that, again, that's something that in this, from a post-digital perspective, something that is, okay, well, this is something to be embraced rather than something to be avoided or like edited out using, in your DAW or whatever. So the lo-fi thing. So what some people are actually doing is that they will record in their DAW, whether it's a rock band or some an ambient piece, and then they'll have the piece in the DAW, and then they'll actually send that through a tape recorder, and then take the tape and record that back into their DAW. So it's acting as like a filter for the music. That people kind of say that the tape plugins, they do something, but it's not quite the same as running it through actual tape. And so then there's the last, composition, production, and performance. Because people now kind of embrace the quirks and the interesting characteristics of tape media, it's and it's readily available, compact, no software updates, it's not going to reset in the middle of a performance or something like that. So you have some of the, like, there definitely is a movement in electroacoustic composition and performance, where people are moving more towards hardware because of its stability and other physical qualities like we're talking about. And so these cassette tape media kind of, they are in that line that they're reliable, they're repairable, and they have these unique sonic characteristics. So it's much easier. Like today, we can have you have a 4-track recorder on stage, and it's very hands-on. It's performative. It's it's quite an engaging instrument. And we'll talk specifically about what exactly this thing is in a moment. Yeah. Okay. So I think it's time for a bit of show and tell. So we've been talking about all these things, and now if you have any questions, we'll take some time. We're gonna have a little break in the middle, so we can address some of them then and at the end. So yeah. Okay, yeah, show and tell. So what are we seeing here? Okay, great. So I want to start with, I'm gonna start with this guy over here. So this is right. I got it plugged in here, so that's okay. You know what? We can just listen to the speaker. Okay. Look at that. All right. So this is a really, let's see here. Yeah, this is a very inexpensive portable Sony cassette tape recorder. I think I got it on eBay for like $30. And this is, when I was young and had to do like an interview for like social studies or something, it was like on something like this. And yeah, why don't I'm gonna put a loop in here, or put something in, and we can kind of listen to it a little bit. Oh, here we go. I'll put this guy in here. So I really wanted to, when we make we're gonna make some tape loops today, or I'm gonna show you how to make a tape loop. And so I wanted to go to a thrift store and find tapes, like, when I went to a thrift store yesterday in order to find tapes to make loops with today. And yeah, I don't. This is so interesting that I don't want to. Cut it up to make loops, but we'll listen to it a little bit. Let's see.
Until relaxation.
There we go.
It is here, in this inner experiencing, that you may create and energize positive events and happenings for your life and those you love.
So already, has a speaker. Just put the tape in. It's it works. But yeah. So once we make our loops, we'll look at some like different techniques we can do with these recorders. But they're really good because, well, you can power them using an adapter, so you don't always need batteries. It's lightweight. Of course, most tape recorders, well, this is the one I bought yesterday, and it didn't work, and I fixed it. And taking the cover off, usually most of them can still operate, and lets you kind of see what's going on. So there's this, that I guess that's another aspect of contemporary electroacoustic music that uses tape media, is that you can actually see somewhat of what's going on and what it's doing.
Turn more deeply now into this inner experience.
Even if the volume's down, you can't really see in the camera, but you can see you can see that these guys are spinning. And if I fast forward it, rewind it. Oops. If I fast forward or rewind it, you can see that it's moving faster. And certainly when it stops, it's stopped. So there's a visual element, which is, I guess in certain other electronic media, like you can see when someone steps on a pedal, or when there are lights blinking. So I kind of like that for a performance. It adds this visual element that, of course, if you have the right cameras and everything. Oh, look at that! Thanks, Joseph. That's good production. Yeah. So, oh yeah, and in addition, this has a mic in and a headphone out. And I know it's only mono. Yeah, we'll do the looping stuff in a little bit. That's going to be a lot of fun. So, yeah, okay. So there's just a basic portable recorder. I'll show you the one I got yesterday, because one of the great things about these tape recorders is that they're pretty simple mechanically. So I want to talk about this now. Well, yeah. Here we go. So they're simple mechanically in that basically the thing that breaks in them the most are these little belts, right? It's just these little rubber belts. And first, what usually happens is they stretch out because they're just on here and they're just made out of rubber or plastic or whatever they are. They stretch out and then sometimes they melt. So for this one, it wasn't playing. I opened it up and I just saw that one of the belts was loose. So I just switched them around, doubled one up, and then boom, it's working. And this thing, it's Radio Shack, which doesn't exist anymore. I don't know if there's a year on it. No, hard to say. But probably from the late 80s, early 90s. And I was like, yeah, it took me 20 minutes to fix it. So that was great. And the other cool thing that I did with this, we'll listen to the same tape, but you'll notice something. There we go. Do I not have? Oh, here we go. Sorry. Oh, there we go. So it is making some. It's possible that something happened to it in the meantime. Oh, there we go. Just very quiet. Yeah, here we go. Here we go. So,
as you sit there, you become aware of the sound of the river.
So we have this insane buzz,
Walk to the song.
which again you can say, oh, it's terrible, or you can make some
Smell
music
the
with it.
grass.
Well, I have some reverb and stuff on it as well, so that's making it sound a little bit. That's making it sound a little bit different as well.
Quiet.
But it's slower. So there's a little. You can adjust the speed of the motor. So I just said, I
As you
that's
enjoy
like
this
little
experience,
screwdriver in, boom.
you
And I
think
have this
about
thing that has a
yourself
crazy
and the
drone
positive
and it plays
qualities that you
tapes,
have,
and
or
still
that
plays
will
when you.
help you enjoy are developing, or are developing, or are developing.
So fast forward and rewind. So the creative applications of this thing that was $12 at Radio Shack are there's a lot there. Or sorry, at Salvation Army. Okay, so that was a couple of portable cassette recorders, and then these guys. So this, and I encourage you. You can kind of see some of them here. So these are little micro cassettes, sometimes known as dictaphones. It's like people were carry them around in their pockets and give themselves notes, for whenever you needed that. And I was actually playing some of this tape earlier. I'll put it through the speakers because that's just going to sound nicer. Yeah, I was like, so these were all, I got these used on eBay. These are kind of expensive for what they are. They're really hard to find new. So these are about $3 a piece on eBay. But they're tapes that someone had recorded probably their other cassette tapes onto, but they wanted something smaller to bring around. I don't know, it's not much smaller than a Walkman. Anyways, we can hear it. Oh yeah. So here we go. So some piano music does the same thing when I was pressing fast forward and rewind, and you hear the woo. That's called scrubbing. And this does it really well too. So you can hear slightly that. Yeah, like it takes a moment. It doesn't just stop. It kind of like, yeah, it takes a moment to get back to the right speed. But then these things, I guess for transcribing, well, it was also to increase the length of the tape. So most of these little microcassette dictaphones have half speed. And the half speed, I think, when you okay, so it takes a while to actually kick in after that. So, anyways, yeah, these are wonderful because it has a half speed built in, and they have this kind of like scratchy scrubbing effect. You can record onto them. You know, you don't even need. They have a speaker, and they have a microphone in and a headphone out, so you can like put them into some kind of system. And yeah, the tapes are a little bit hard to come by, but this, you know, I think this was like $20 on like Kijiji or Facebook Marketplace. So, and then the other one, which I don't have any here, is just a regular Walkman. You know, the original kind of like portable music system. And yeah, they don't have half speed. Most of them can't record. Some of them have a radio. So yeah, and sometimes, especially with like Stranger Things really blown up now, like Walkman are getting like, some of them are getting kind of expensive. So creatively, they're not like super interesting. For usually much cheaper, you can get something like, you know, like a portable cassette recorder that has a lot more creative uses. Yeah, so the Walkman, they're fine, but I haven't found you know, an interesting use for them. Besides I listen, I try and collect some tapes that I like, so I have them at home plugged into my interface, so when I'm working, I can listen to a tape. Okay. So we'll talk. No, I'm gonna talk about kind of how the tape recorders work once we get a tape loop going. So I think yeah, I'm gonna have a sip of water here. Okay. Yeah. So I'm going to teach you how to make a tape loop. So I guess the first thing is, well, having a cassette recorder is really good, because then you can put anything you want onto the loop. But what we're going to start with is something that making a loop from a tape that already has something on it, because then you embrace the serendipity of where you make the cut and where it loops and all that. So we'll hear that. So yesterday, in my search, praying to the thrift gods, I found this awesome broken recorder and some tapes. So this that kind of meditative one that I had on earlier, well, that's in there. That was there, and what appear to be some blank. I need to do, what is that? There. Some blank, what look to be blank cassettes. Now I really look out for clear cassettes, because as you'll see up, and I'll kind of demonstrate. I'll show you what some of these sound like in a little bit, like after we kind of made our own. But having a clear case, you actually get to see the tape moving around, and which is just really great. Again, presenting that visible element of the performance. the tape is performing. It is doing something physical that you can see. So this is a tape of like a rehearsal between like a man, like a vocal coach perhaps, and then there's a pianist. I don't know if the coach is also the pianist, but then a singer, a female singer, and so we're gonna cut this tape up and make 2 loops out of it. So yeah, so let's start. So I said having some kind of a cassette recorder is the first step. Looking for just buying any cassettes. Like I don't have any here that you can find all kinds of lots of classical music as well, which sometimes makes for really interesting loops. But you can crack open any tape and take the tape out and start cutting out and make a loop. But like I said, having an eye out for the clear cases is really good. So, okay, this is great. So the other thing to look out for are cassette tapes with screws. So some of them have 4, some of them have 5. This has 5. So what we're going to do, we'll just open this up. And cassette tapes, they range from some places sell them for 20 cents, 25 cents, up to $1 or $2. I think Value Village, they're $2. And but then if you want to buy, like there are record stores and music shops that sell new and vintage tapes, and the vintage tapes range from, if they're albums that people actually want or like, they might be $5, they might be more. There again, it's growing in popularity. And but that's as a whether it's a fun hobby or something you want to integrate into your creative practice, it's relatively inexpensive to get into. And these screwdrivers, bought them at the dollar store. Pretty simple. Now, what I'm going to do, I was really lucky when I first started to get into this. I found, I'm currently living in Montreal, I found someone selling a bunch of blank cassettes. So there's no tape in here. So maybe what I'll do is I'll open this one up first, because what I'm going to do is I want to save this, because a tape loop, to make 5 seconds, it's less than 10 inches of tape. And they're like, I don't know, like if 5 seconds is 10 inches and this is an hour of tape, that's a lot. Like you basically have enough tape for spending like $1 to have to make tape loops for the rest of your life, and you won't run out. So and if you're using tape loops, like I do basically all my tape looping live, so I'm not necessarily on the hunt for like rare tapes with cool sounds on it that I want to make loops out of. Maybe that's something I do in the future, but right now I'm not. So yeah, basically once I have some cases I like, and I have all the material I need, like in one tape. But so that is all to say that especially if I have a tape that I really like and I don't want to get rid of, like I will keep it. So I've been using these blank tapes. So this is a Peter Tosh reggae album that I found in the dirt, like on the way, like walking to the studio. I'm like, oh, and I put it in, it's like, oh, it works. It was like all, crummy and dirty and stuff. So it's like, okay, I'll clean it up. I was like, man, I want to make some reggae loops. So I just put the tape, and it was a bootleg actually, so would have been in a case like this. And so I took, because I wanted to use the clear case for something that I'm going to be taking video of, use it in performance, I put the rest of the tape in one of these blank cassettes. So I'll just show you that, because then it's easy to help you understand kind of what's happening in these bad boys. And I think there's a Canadian company that produces does runs of tapes for bands, and they sell blank tapes and empty cassettes and all this stuff. And I think from them, they're about maybe maybe around $2 a piece. I'm showing you what not to do, so that's, you know. Now the screws coming out of this, I'm not going to use this for a loop today. I'm using it for storage, so the screws aren't that big a deal. Okay, so let's open this up and we'll just talk about what's going on here. Great. So we have this kind of flimsy material that's in most of these. Sometimes, oops, we'll see that it's clear in this other one. I'll put that back. I think it's just to protect things. I don't actually know what it truly does, but I usually get rid of that, and if it's a cool color, I might put it in. Oh yeah. So some of these blank guys have like a nice shiny red one, so it's like, okay, that looks nice. And this, we'll talk about this weird loop in a moment. So we have two reels. This is the uptake reel and the feeder reel, because on the A side of a tape, let's see here, get one that actually says A. Okay, here we go. On the A side of a tape, it plays. It plays from the feeder reel to the take-up reel, kind of left to right. So yeah, we have the two reels, and yeah, here, this is called leader. So it's so that, I suppose you just have some time, you can hit record and it has to run through the leader before it actually starts recording or playing. But for our purposes, we're just gonna cut this off. And this is where, you know, we're cutting this off. I'm not gonna, well, maybe yeah. I'm just gonna put it on the floor for now. So this is the cutting room floor. Like they were like editing tapes, and that's what would happen, like in film and stuff. Or we're cutting this out onto the cutting room floor. So that's where that term comes from. Yeah, and then we have these tiny, what do they call it? Reels? They're not reels. They're little rollers. There we go. So I took the rollers out because they're a different color, and I got the reels. We'll leave these out. We'll take this guy out. Yeah, we'll kind of leave the rest in. There's like some little shielding in here that, again, for loops, like it's not about getting like an amazing quality recording. So yeah, I don't really see any use of them. And you see some of the tools I'm using, like again, dollar store box cutter, you know, dollar store tweezers. Tweezers are really helpful because, as you will see, tape gets a little bit challenging to work with. And this here, this is where the tape runs along. Yeah, if I'm just showing it to the camera, do I need to show it to you guys? Can you see it? Like if I'm like showing you this, do I need to also do this? It doesn't matter, right? Oh. Yeah, so the tape, this is a little soft part here. So the tape actually runs along this, and then the play head that reads the tape is right under that. And we'll have a look at that later. So, you know, I haven't found a use for these. But it's just more so to show you kind of what's going on. So we have our blank tape. Now we're going to take. Now, I could have. Now I'm trying to think. Where was the sound on this? Maybe I was playing it from the B side. You know what? Just to be safe, because I want to get some of this recorded rehearsal that was on this tape. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to put it back together. And having tweezers or a little screwdriver, the tape sometimes gets stuck. You can see that in the bottom. Yeah, it's a little bit hard to see, but you know, it has like little teeth that the tape is supposed to be behind. So when you're putting it together, yeah, sometimes the tape can get stuck or a little bit crinkled. And again, if it gets crinkled, way to go. Like it's gonna be degraded in a little bit. And so again, something to be embraced. The tape itself is not super precious. Like you can kind of handle it, and it will be fine. Oh yeah. Anyways, got to put this guy a little bit back together. I'm gonna take out this shield just so we can see the tape. It's a label. Okay. Now this is the part that's you know, it gets a little finicky. Some people don't like this aspect, but I like, you know, throwing on some music and just knowing I have a bunch of time, and yeah, and just working with this. I find it quite relaxing. Now, a good tip is that when you're putting in screws, to turn it, you hear that? I'm turning it counterclockwise first, and I'm pushing down, and you hear, you kind of can't. I made one, so you'll feel that it'll lock in place, and then you know the thread of the screws and the thread of the hole, and then you can turn it clockwise, and it will go in, and you know it's not cross-threaded or doing something funny. No, maybe I should use a different screwdriver. There we go. Okay, so I've only got one in. It's still going to play. I just want to hear it. So this, well, I know this. So this recorder here, it plays things fast, and it's designed that way because the idea is that when the tape is moving faster, you hear less of the wow and flutter. But when it's moving really slowly, it has this. It'll have all these sonic qualities that, if you're trying to be really have a pristine recording, it won't work. Yeah, you don't want the wow and the flutter and the hear the tape moving when you're trying to have a perfect recording. So yeah, so this machine was designed to play faster. So yeah, let's just press play here. Okay, so there's stuff there. That's great. And so like I mentioned, the tapes have like an A side and a B side. And when we make a loop with this, well, in here in a 4-track, the way it plays is that you're actually hearing both sides at the same time. These 4 tracks, you record them to make kind of like a master that you would then, I guess, make. Yeah, you'd make a master, and then you'd have to like mix down to another thing. So you're not actually making tapes that you would then like buy from a 4-track, because you're hearing both sides at the same time. So that's a little bit technical, but anyways, on the 4 tracks, that's why you're kind of hearing those two things going on, because you're hearing both the A side and the B side. But now when we make this loop, we'll be hearing, well, whatever side we have it on, we'll be hearing that little section, and then we'll have to flip it over to hear the other side. Okay. So now I like, because, you know, I was traveling and I wanted, you know, to be traveling a little bit lighter, I just brought these guys, but I prefer to have something with something a bit longer with a rubber handle. Just makes it a bit nicer to work with. Okay. Beautiful. So I'm going to, you know what, it's fine. I would normally rewind this all the way or fast forward it so that's all on one side, so it's a little bit easier to work with. But we're just going to take some of this tape in here, because we know sometimes if you're at the beginning of the tape and you take the beginning for the loop, there won't be anything on there. So we know there's some here. So I'm going to leave it like this. I'm just going to pick it up. Again, the tape is not, you're not hurting it. I'm going to put it in here. And what I'm going to do, yeah, again, dollar store scissors. I'm just going to make a cut here. Boom. And I'm going to draw from this side. This guy can stay in here. And I'm going to leave this, let's see, I'm going to leave this guy hanging out, because this is my storage tape. So I'm just going to put this on here, and I'm going to poke this in. Here we go. So now I have this loose end that I can just I can pull on, and I'm just going to put one screw in case something happens and I need to open it up. Boom, right in the middle. Perfect. So here again, now I have all the material for looping for the rest of my life. And if I want to be like some kind of weird, choral like vocalist rehearsal looper, then here we go. If any of you want this to be your career, I will give this tape to you. So, all right. So to make a loop, there are lots of guides and other instructional videos online. We're going pretty like in depth here, showing you every aspect of it, and I'm talking through it. Yeah, so you can always look some of these things up. But what we're going to do today is we're going to edit this down so that the tape making process is a little bit more fluid, maybe less conversational, and more instructional. So anyways, this will be available to listen to at a later date as well. Okay, so the first one, we're going to just make a really simple 5-second loop. And so I'm going to measure out 9 1/4 inches. So one of the important things is that not like this bottom side of the tape or like, you want the side, like if it's coming out like this, you kind of want to keep track of that, because one thing you have to know is that in these mobile, in all tape recorders, you have this guy down here. Oh yeah, look, see, so it's mechanical. So even when I press play, you can see that this is the reed head that pops up here. It's actually in these, it's a read and record. So this pops up. So the tape is passing along here. So it's the bottom side of the tape that has material and can be recorded to. The other side that's not touching the playhead, you can't record onto that. So this is an error I've made, that I've like made these loops and I'm like pulling my hair out. Oh, is the microphone broken? Is my levels wrong? Like, what's going on? It's like, oh, I messed it up and I had the wrong side of the tape down. So doing something like this and you can see that it's curving, so you know, like, okay, this is the way it's wrapped around. So you know it's going kind of with the curve, or is it against? Well, whatever. You can see. So this is the bottom part that I want to keep track of. So we're going to do 9 1/4 inches, and again, this doesn't have to be exact, right? We're not making music that is, or we don't need a loop that's going to be exactly 5 seconds, or it's very. Here we go. So I've got this little cutting surface that I brought, and again, all dollar store, because just I wanted to see what the dollar store had to offer. Okay, so we need 9 1/4, so we need a bit more. I'm going to hold this against here, and this is great. I have it in here, so you can see the reel is moving. And that's 9 1/2. Okay, 9 1/4. Maybe a bit more. You know what? I'm just going to grab it here, and I'm going to get my scissors. Here we go. And there's some people that will really say, like back in the day when they were making like acousmatic, like musique concrète and making loops and all this stuff, they would cut at a diagonal line and splice it using special splicing tape. Because if it's a diagonal line and it's passing over this playhead, the diagonal line means that the break in the tape is distributed over a longer period of time, whereas a straight line down the center, we'll hear it. You'll hear this little pop. You'll hear a pop of it passing over where the tape is not perfectly joined. So a diagonal line kind of prevents that. We don't care about that right now. And splicing tape, I've got some. I'm going to use it. Apparently it lasts longer, so maybe if I'm going to be doing this, that's important. But regular Scotch tape is just fine for this. Okay, so the next thing, this is, I haven't seen anyone else do this, but I find it's really important. Cheap dollar store Post-its, and the reason why you want the cheap ones is because they're not that sticky. So if you're using something that's really sticky, some people say, like, get the stickiness off with your pant leg. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to fold it over kind of twice here so that it sticks to the surface, and it's also sticky up here. And the reason I want it sticky up here is because I'm going to take this and I'm putting the play side down, as I'm keeping track of this, because I'm going to put the tape on the side that's not being read. Because if I put the tape on the side that's being read, it's not going to read whatever's under the tape. And by Scotch tape, we got to make sure that we're, you know. So look, I'm keeping it. I'm making sure. I'm holding it here. I'm making sure that's in line with the loop, because if you put what's called a Mobius loop or a Mobius strip in it, it'll flip over to the other side, and we don't really want that here. So this, again, where it gets a bit finicky, different people find it, you know, that their hands stick differently to tape. Now, I'm going to try and line it up. Wow. Look at this, is going so well. Sometimes you'll stick it and it'll be a little bit off. The other good thing about the cheap Post-its is that the stickiness isn't that much, so you can kind of sometimes like move it once it's been stuck to kind of line it up. But again, if it's a little bit off, this is not, yeah, it's not rocket science. It's not even, you know, this is not even like common time stuff. It's not, you know, it's not meant to be super accurate. Now the amount of tape you need is very little, and you'll see kind of why, because we're trying to put less material on as possible. So this is like this minuscule amount of tape, and you know I'm gonna have to, you know, take my glasses off of this so I can still see. I can see where the cut is, and I'm putting this against. I'm putting like the tape. Here we go. Now, so it's a little bit hard to see there. I'll point with this, but what I did, like one side of the tape, I tried to put it exactly on. Sorry, one side of the Scotch tape that it's nice and straight. I put it against where the joint is. And so what I'm going to do, I mean, you can use this or a box cutter or whatever. So what I'm going to do is just very carefully, well, actually, not even very carefully. I'm just maybe reasonably carefully. I don't want to cut myself, but I'm going to use this. I'm just cutting the tape on the other side. And if cutting the Scotch tape, and if a little bit of the magnetic tape comes off, that's fine. Now I be very careful. Let's see, do I make the cut? Oh yeah, okay. So I'm going to pull on one side and then pull on the other to make sure that the join doesn't, wow, look at that. Okay, so we have this. It's going to be roughly 5 second, tape loop. So we're going to leave that to the side. We still have our kind of our source material close by. Now we're going to go back to here. Let's take this out. I just want it as clear as possible. Our two reels from the sacrifice tape, if we want to call it, are in here. So we're going to use the 2 reels from here. Now you don't even need 2 reels. You can just use 1, but I think 2 is better, and we'll see why. So look, let's move this out of the way. Let's see, how's that? Great. So, just kind of going to lay it in there. And I'm going to use my tweezers because that's a little bit easier. Do this. And, okay, so it's a little bit, there's a little bit of tension there. So, put this in. Yeah, look at that. So, one good thing, or a good thing to note, is that there's these little posts on the side there. Let's hold this up. So there's a little post here that plays no role in the operation of the tape. And you know, on a break, if you guys want to get closer, you can. You know, if it's easier. But look, oh my God, the production. This is great. Okay, so you see, there's a post up here, and there's a little post here, and there's a little post here. So you see that I've wrapped around this post. So the tension, depending on the player you're putting it in, if the loop is really loose, and the roller, I guess it would be the take-up roller, is the capstan of the take-up roller. Anyways, depending on the player, it might if the loop is really loose, it might eat it. But like it'll pull the tape out of the cassette and get all jammed up. Or if it's too tight, the motor might not run it. So you can see here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, oh, this is so good. I'm just going to take this, I'm going to hold this down, I'm going to bring this on the other side, because we're just going to listen to it. So you see, it's like, you know, it's a little bit loose there. So this is great. All right, our 5-second loop. Let's put this on here. And again, I can show you now, stay zoomed in. You can kind of see these little teeth here. There we go. So yeah, you kind of got to watch out that they don't get stuck. So having tweezers, having your little tiny screwdriver is really good. So yeah, look at that, gorgeous. Now we're gonna put, and for ease like this, these cases are good because they have 5 screws, and to like listen to it, yeah, we just need to put 1 screw in. Now, okay, I'm gonna bring this guy over. Here we go. We'll turn it. We'll do this. Make it. What does it matter? No, we'll just do this. Okay. Now, my plug. Plug this in, and it's just going to come out of the speakers. So, yeah. So let's see. So you can see the join that's like a little bit crinkled. You see it kind of traveling around. And then you can actually predict where you're going to hear the little blip and wobble. This is making some strange sounds. Now so that worked great. And it's, you know, you kind of want it to have a little bit of wobble. So I kind of like that. Tighten this up. Now let's listen to, so we're flipping it. Oh, okay, so this, see that just happened? There we go. So this is really funny. I only having 1 screw in, normally it just works fine. But this, you see that with only 1 screw in, it was the case was loose enough that the reel came out. Now, so this is another important thing. I'll show this here. When I hit play, you see it's only the take-up reel that moves. This side doesn't move. So you really need to have this reel in. Because that's really going to help you. You can, yeah, I guess you can lose this and not have this in and have this one in, but it won't work as well. Now, and this is another point. Oh, I'm losing screws. That's okay. So this is going here. Hold this down. Oh, there we go. Thank you. Yeah, so we have the take-up. The motor is turning what would be the take-up reel, and that is helping move the tape. But really, what's doing it the most is these 2 guys down here. This is the capstan, which is just like a little metal pin that that is spinning, and that moves the roller here, which is just a little rubber. Yeah, it's covered in rubber, and this is what actually pulls the tape around. Even though we see this moving, for tape loops, this is kind of the more important thing. This helps, but yeah. Okay. How badly? I don't need that screw badly enough. So what we're going to do, we're here. I'm going to put a couple in, and then we're going to make another loop, and then we're going to record something onto these loops. So we got this here. I'll do my other. Oops. So I'm just poking the tape in, making sure it's not getting, because it gets between those teeth, then it'll just get stuck and it just won't play. So a little bit of like crunchiness and crinkles and stuff like that. There's nothing wrong with that, and it's maybe even, you know, desired. But wait, I don't want this in here. Let me flick this out. I'm going to put them in opposite opposite corners. This is the other method that I do when there's no center. No center tape. There we go. Hear that little pop? That was me turning it counterclockwise first, so I know it was going in. All right, that's a little bit more solid. Get that middle one out. Okay. So, and you always know that the side with the screws is the A side. So even if you have all the labels off, yeah. So we have the screws. Okay. So we're gonna flip this over, and yeah. So this is the B side.
There's a lot there, and this line, there's a lot there, and this line, there's a lot there, and this line.
So yeah, we'll talk about some more techniques in a second. Okay, so there we go, 5-second tape loop, and you know, whether the sample, the actual sound that was already on there is something you want or not, that's really something you can decide. Now that I have a lot of loops that I use for live performance, I feel like I want to keep some of the really like nice, like, you know, just circumstantial things I find. But this one, you know, no problems of recording over it. Okay, we'll put this to the side. Now we're going to do what I've heard called the Chandler Loop. Where this name comes from, I don't know, but it's a 7-second loop. So what we're going to do, something in here. Yeah, we're going to use, no, you know what? We're going to use one of the blank ones. Just because, like, I could use this, but it already has tape in it, and then I would need to store it again. But there's nothing on this, so I'd like to just leave it as it is. So we won't be able to. I kind of really want to see it. Well, you know what? I'll make the Chandler the 7-second loop so you can see how it's done, and then I'll kind of show you. Yeah, I've got a few here that are made like that. So then I'll just show you just to see what it looks like as it's spinning around spinning around the tape. So loosen these up. Yeah, so we were going for it here. I thought we'd have time for a break, but this is more time consuming than I imagined. Lots to talk about. And we'll have a little bit of time at the end to talk about some actual techniques. So, okay, we're gonna take this leader, just cut it off. I'm cutting it off pretty close to the reels, but you can actually leave a little bit on, and again, it just introduces some more wobble and cutting floor, or more wobble and more lo-fi goodness. Okay, so I'm just going to leave everything in. We're going to take this. So our 7-second, we're going to do 14 1/4. So like this is only, it's not a very good ruler for this because it only goes up to 12 inches. But okay, so we'll go roughly. Okay, here we go. 12 inches, and then we'll just add on another 2 1/4. There we go. I mean, this is rough, and if it's too loose, I can make use of the posts that I showed you in that last one. Okay, so see if I can do this a bit more quickly. Already got our post-it set up. Important to keep it in the right orientation. Let's see if I can do as good a job as the last one. The longer tape, it's a bit more challenging. And look at that. Boom. Super take a very small amount of Scotch tape, line up the flat end of the tape with the flat end of the Scotch with the flat end of the magnetic tape. Use my little scalpel here to cut off a bit. Pull on one side, pull on the other. Yeah, so if you're using something that's stickier than this, it'll actually pull off some of the magnetic, I think it's ferric covering of the magnetic tape, which will impede its ability to record, and whatever's on there will get kind of disrupted. So this one's really interesting because you have to make the loop by kind of physically wrapping it around differently. So we have all this tape, and how do we fit it in? So we have it here, good, see everything. I'm gonna grab this with my tweezers and bring it up here. So we have kind of wrapping around. I'm gonna take this loose end, and this loose end is gonna go over here. This might be, and I'm gonna lay I know it's obstructing the view, but I'm just gonna lay my hand kind of here so the rest of it doesn't come up and come off. Look at that. So as I pull this, you can kind of see the other side tightening. I'm just going to lay it in place. Wow, look at that. So it's a little loose. Let's see here. Oh shoot. See, this is what happens. Sticky. I'm using my fingernail and it's still stuck to it. Okay. This is why tweezers are good. I have to touch it. There we go. Okay, so we're just going to leave it like that. These blank cassettes aren't very good for loops because it's very hard to make sure they don't get stuck in the tape. So what I'm going to do, because down here, this is where all the teeth are, so I'm just, for now, I'm just going to like pull it up like this. Let's see if it'll stay. Will it stay there? No, it's not really staying there. Okay, I'm just going to do my best here to put it in. Okay, I'll show you. Nothing stuck in there. Okay, so now we'll listen to our, I'm going to put one on each corner. Okay, so we've got our A side in. I'm going to watch very closely to make sure it doesn't eat the tape. You see? Okay, I'm going to show you something. I don't know how this is happening. I guess it's so loose, or maybe the you can see here that the tape is actually found its way like outside of the reel, so it might. Well, I want to listen to it and see what happens. It's not even that wobbly. Okay. B side.
Or, in a one day. Vocally, but you can restore, in a one day. Vocally, but you can restore.
And it's like you can't even hear where you can hear by the repetition, but it's not like there's not an obvious or not a super obvious like sonic artifact to say like, oh, this is like some weird DIY tape loop, right? Of course, the audio quality suggests that, but yeah, I guess I did a pretty good job of putting the tape in and everything like that. So before we run out of time, I just want to just show you one thing about recording to these. So we'll take, just for ease and to see how it all works, we're going to take our 5-second loop and we're just going to record over it. Okay, so we'll just talk very quickly. So we see here in the top, there are these tabs. And in kind of cassette tapes that are meant to be recorded onto, the tabs are in. So this tells there's like a little mechanical thing that with the tabs in, it allows you to record over the tape. So if you have something that you don't want to record it over, as you'll see in this guy, the tabs are out. So there's none in here. So in order to record over this guy, you just put a bit of Scotch tape over both of these, and then you record over them. And yeah, the functions is the same as the tabs being in. So yeah, so we'll see what happens when I record my voice onto this. So we're recording a 5-second loop, and we will see that it's going to erase previously what's on there, but there'll also be a gap. It's going to erase previously what's on there, but there'll also be a gap. It's going to erase previously what's on there, but there'll also be a gap. Okay, we're actually not hearing the gap. So let's do that again. Okay, I'm gonna sing a note. La. So you hear that it cuts out, but there was no cutout like that on the previous on the loop that had already material on it. And it's because, and this will be the last thing we talk about, and then we can ask some questions and we can open it up a little bit. I'll show you this again. That when I hit play, there's the play head, but now there's this little notch here that with the tabs being out, it will stay down like this. So I'm just going to press this, and this is going to allow me to press the record button. And you will see this guy come up. This is the erase head. So this is so that it erases the previous material so that you can actually record onto it. Because otherwise, you get what's called sound on sound, and you get both the new and the old. So the ingenious way to solve this problem, of course there's people that do mods, and they can add switches and buttons to disengage the erase head. But good old tinfoil does the trick as well. So I just put it in, and you can just see that now, well, so now when I record, it's not gonna erase what was there before. And if you listen closely, you hear that the gap is in the lower note and not the top. So I'll just demonstrate that very quickly. So if I just do this, yeah, I'll take it. Just recording some silence so we can really hear what this does. Put the tinfoil in, wrap it up, and now I'm going to just do one note. And you'll hear that even with the tinfoil in, it kind of gives you some leeway in like playing and recording gestures that go beyond the loop, and you'll have a little bit of overlap once it gets past the 5 second, but you will lose that like what's called the record gap that happens when you have the erase head engaged. You hear a little bit of how there's a little bit of an overlap. Well, there you go. So look, we're we're pretty much out of time. There's a that was the introduction to kind of the post-digital framework or way of thinking about these kind of so-called obsolete media and how they can be used to great advantage and fun and creative potential with a more modern perspective. In that they're not obsolete, but they offer creative alternatives to digital media, and showing the kind of two basic, what I find super fun and enjoyable ways of engaging with this media and making tape loops with super affordable, like you can get like for $50 and like you're set up to make as many tape loops as you want. And of course it gets with different players and repairing them, things like that. Of course it can get more expensive, but to start, this is a really great way to get engaged with this media. So yeah, we'll leave it there and open it up to questions. So thank you.